So I feel like we should have some context, like before we jump in. Like normally we just jump in and start talking, but like we're recording this on June 24th, 2022, and I found out about the overturning of Roe v. Wade about an hour ago. And we've been
Yeah.
dealing with tech troubles ever since then. So the overturning, like even though we knew it was coming, even though we knew it was leaked, like I don't know about you, but I was like, oh, it's been leaked, so we know it's coming. So like, people can actually deal with it and make it not actually happen. And then when it was overturned, like the day after they overturned all of the gun laws, which was incredibly like controversial and like incredibly tone deaf for what the nation is going through right now. And then like literally the next day they overturn Roe v. Wade too. It's like, I don't know. Maybe it's my Leo rising or something, but I didn't see it coming and I feel stupid.
I honestly, it shows you maybe my level of cynicism. I saw this. I assumed it was just basically a done deal at this point. I'm not surprised in the least. I feel like this is maybe my hot take, but it's actually my like personal belief. But I definitely would be a liberal leaning person, probably more so than maybe the mainstream.
Same.
But the Democratic Party, I think they make too much money off of stirring up this sort of controversy. Getting people pissed off about what the Republicans are doing is how they get campaign contributions. So, I mean, they basically let this happen when they allowed Donald Trump to get 3 Supreme Court justices, super conservative ones. So I don't know what anybody was expecting. Granted, I get that the political tradition is to approve approve the appointment of the president's appointment for the Supreme Court.
Right.
But then, like, when they didn't let Obama do it, like, they're clearly stacking it, and our system, you're able to prevent it for a reason, to prevent that sort of Supreme Court stacking of justices. And you had a president who was not playing by any of the political conventions. So
right.
I'm kind of just like a little dumbstruck when it comes to what the Democratic Party is doing overall. And I think, honestly, it's the campaign contributions are just too huge when we all get pissed off.
Right.
We're all probably getting emails right now from Democratic Party candidates about how pissed off we should be about this. And the Republicans are doing this to us and asking for money. And they're probably going to get a bunch.
Yeah. And, to be fair, like I'm just as liberal as you are, but I think that it's not just a Democratic problem because the Republicans are doing the same thing. The Republicans have been doing this for years. And I feel like the difference between the Democrats and the Republicans is not passion. It's not will, though I think that there are some people in Democratic leadership who have been there for too long and are too comfortable. But I think it's just a war of money. I mean, we were talking about this earlier where before we started recording. When we're talking about the chart of the United States, for our purposes, we're using the Sibly chart. And we were talking about the fact that in whole sign houses and in Placidus, Pluto is in the second house in the US Sibly chart. And, we have entered a situation. I think that it became crystal clear during that. I'm blanking on that court case where corporations became people for.
Oh, the name, I can't remember the name either, but yeah.
My brain is absolutely.
That would be a good chart to look at because that certainly marks a chapter in the decay of Western democracy. I'm sure that shows up in the chart somehow.
Absolutely. But like you were pointing out that, a plutocracy is the rule of the wealthy. Pluto in the
Yeah.
house of wealth in Capricorn.
Yeah.
It's like, I feel like I'm seeing a picture of the Koch brothers every time I look at that house, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, that's it's opposing Mercury too, like in the 8th house, which
Mhm.
is another money house. But it
Yeah.
rules like the 7th and 10th, rules the angles, like two important angles. Um,
Yeah, I haven't noticed that
yeah.
stellium in, to be fair, I haven't looked at the Sibly chart very much. Like,
Mhm.
I'm pretty much pulling it out for this episode, but, like,
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting that there's a stellium in the 8th house in this chart. Venus, Jupiter, the Sun, and Mercury are all in Cancer in the 8th house in the Sibly chart.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah.
kind of
Go ahead.
no,
I think you
you
blanked
go.
out for a second. I've thought about this a lot too, and it doesn't super fit maybe early on, though. You could say like there's a democratic element to the 8th house where it's like a
Mm.
pooling of resources of collective will in a sense.
Mm. Mhm.
Um, but it certainly makes a lot of sense by like World War II, post World War II, even World War One, really, because we World War One because we stayed neutral for so long. Um,
Mhm.
Basically, pre World War One, all the money in the world, not all of it, but most of it, the economic center powerhouse of the world was London. There was just money pooled into London. Uh,
Right.
by the end of World War One, it was all in New York because we were just loaning out money to the Allies primarily, but we were earlier on we were loaning out stuff to the Axis as well. We came out on top of that war,
Mm.
and then likewise with World War II, we basically became an economic empire. Which, I mean, Jupiter and Cancer in the 8th, ruling the ascendants, like getting fat off of the resources of others. I mean, think about this country; it was taken from other people. It was
Yeah.
formerly inhabited by a native population that mostly died so that we could live here. And
Yeah.
it kind of fits.
It's interesting to me. I'm comparing the chart of the time for the overturning of Roe v. Wade. We're using 10 o'clock in the morning. I don't know what sources you have for that, but I was
Yeah.
basically going by when they started reporting on it this morning. They started reporting on it at around 10:30, and so I thought it might take them about half an hour to get the news out.
Yeah. You said
But
9:30
it's
for?
interesting. 10 o'clock for
You
the
said
time.
10.
So
Okay.
10:30 is when the news report started in the big papers like the New York Times. So I'm guessing it took them about half an hour to get coordinated on everything. Um,
Yeah.
but
I
it's
heard 10
very
o'clock
interesting because
today.
okay, okay, so that's what I've got too. Um, so I'm looking at that Cancer stellium in the Sibly chart and in the Roe v. Wade overturning chart. The sun is precisely conjunct Venus by 3 minutes. The sun is
Mm,
at 3 degrees 3 minutes of Cancer, and
hmm.
Venus is at 3 degrees 6 minutes of Cancer. Um, so, of course, that also
Oh,
means that
wow.
there's a conjunction between the sun and Jupiter, too. Um,
You have a Leo rising, right? For
yeah, 24
the overturn?
degrees.
Yeah.
Yeah, is that what you got? Okay.
Yeah, that's interesting because you get the sun in the 12th, sort of undoing
Mhm.
something. It's undoing stuff, doing 12th house
Yeah,
sorts of things. Maybe
undoing
things that
that Venus.
we'll regret later. Yeah, undoing Venus. That it's yeah. That's it.
Undoing Venus, undoing Jupiter. I feel like Jupiter is, the planet of making the hard decisions that it can see from that 30,000-foot view are like,
Mhm.
you know, they're the right decision for those kinds of like big picture reasons that maybe might not make as much sense from the ground. Like I talk about
Yeah.
this with a lot of people, and like, I'm not pro-choice because I'm pro killing babies. Like that is absolutely not the case.
Yeah.
I'm pro-choice because of what the alternative is, which
Yeah.
is women dying, desperate women getting themselves into desperate circumstances, rapists being able to put women in a position where they have to marry them or lose all of their social standing. Like,
Mhm.
so I feel like those kinds of concerns and those kinds of decision makings are very much ruled by Jupiter.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, I
it's
go ahead.
no, go ahead. No, no.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I always think of, Saturn and Jupiter basically having sort of uh, co-significators for government, like in law,
Mhm.
where
Yep.
Jupiter establishes what you are allowed to do. It is the establisher of rights. What are your rights?
Mhm.
Jupiter
Yeah.
establishes that. Saturn says what you can't do, says the limits of what you're
Yeah.
allowed to do. Um, what is illegal? Jupiter is what is legal, what is supported.
Mhm.
Uh, what is the date for Roe v. Wade again? I might have the wrong date.
No, that's fine. So Roe v. Wade is January 22nd, 1973 at 10 a.m.
January 22nd. Okay, that's what I have. I have
Yes.
Venus in Capricorn for this chart.
Okay. Let me see if I have the right.
Yeah, I don't think Venus could be in Capricorn or in Cancer. It can't be in January. Uh, wrong side of the zodiac. I hate when I get like the
January
wrong chart for
23,
something and I start interpreting.
1973, Washington District of Columbia. Yeah.
January 22nd.
Yeah. Okay, okay. Yeah, Venus and Capricorn. So I've been talking about all of these. Oh, wait a minute. Okay, so that's Roe v. Wade. I think I was talking about all of that cancer stuff in the
Oh,
Sibly
that's
chart.
right.
Yeah,
Duh.
yeah.
I
Okay.
know.
Oh, which
There's a lot of charts.
is very interesting because that means that there's a
Opposite signs.
big Capricorn stellium in the Roe v. Wade chart, which is opposite a Cancer stellium in the US Sibly chart.
Hmm. That is interesting. Because, well, there's a lot of different ways of looking at it. Uh, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
actually I'm very much with you in the sense that like I'm not pro-choice because I'm pro killing babies. I'm pro-choice because I'm pro-choice, choosing. You know, it's up to you. But a lot of the arguments around it have to do with, uh, the what's the word I'm looking for? The the rights that maybe we offer to the unborn, I guess. Um, and I guess I can't help but even think about it in terms of like you think the moon in Cancer or the moon in Taurus, which it is in right now, and Jupiter in Cancer, which it is in like the US Sibly chart, is very
Mm-hmm.
those are two planets that maybe are you would maybe be inclined towards more babies, more. We like babies, lots
Mm-hmm.
and lots of babies. Uh, and certainly early on in the United States history, more people like what is it, the Statue of Liberty. It was like, bring us your, give us everyone. We'll take
Right.
everyone.
Yeah.
And that was part of U.S. success, even during colonization, is that the life expectancy was higher, babies were healthier, and families were larger. But then you have in the Sibly chart, the sort of a lot of fertile planets maybe in Capricorn.
Right.
And while I'm not making an argument on it from a like population control standpoint, it is kind of descriptive in the sense that it's saying no to more to some
Right.
degree, or saying yes to limitation. When you get Venus
Hmm.
in Jupiter in Capricorn, but sort of countering something that was set maybe in motion at the birth of the country.
Hmm.
This is tricky. Like I'm just looking at these charts for the first time, and it's like
Yeah,
a
me
lot to
too. We're both processing
untangle.
this at the same time,
Yeah.
which is why I'm taking, which, to be fair, is the approach that I usually take. I'm not a person who sits down and, processes everything like a computer and then spits out like a complete picture. Like,
Oh
I
yeah.
very much trust that, the message that wants to come through to the chart will speak to me, and that's just, the way that
Yeah.
I work. But that seesaw between Cancer and Capricorn, it's like there were certain values that were put in place, and of course Jupiter is a values planet that were set in place in the 18th century that made sense for the 18th
Hmm.
century. Like, it is, um, in an agrarian society, the more children you have, the wealthier you are, because the more um, people you have in the family working on the farm. And
Hmm.
then by 1973, we had entered into a completely different economic system. Instead of people being more prosperous, the more children they had, we start having people, advocating for birth control, which would have been absolute madness in the 18th century because, it would basically be like, you know, plowing under your wheat just before you harvest it, or like shooting your milk cow in the head. Like, you just
Yeah.
wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh
it
yeah.
would be absolutely stupid. But like in the 1970s, it, if you are if children don't make money for you anymore. They take your money away. And so we have a lot of, Mercury and Jupiter and Venus are, they're in Cancer in the Sibly chart, and they're in Capricorn in the row chart. And it's like a completely different set of values. Fertility at the founding of the nation,
Hmm.
restriction, lack, um, an awareness of,
The harsh
you know,
realities of the world, and like what actually
exactly.
is entailed when you have a baby, and in contrast to
Hmm.
like what the reality of the world really. It's sorry to cut you off. I'm
No,
like
no.
having thoughts, because this is, go ahead and finish your thought. I'm sorry.
No, no, I was doing that thing where I was filling in space. Like, please continue.
um so this is really interesting to me because I know that there are people who might take astrology very literally, in the sense that,
Hmm.
like, oh, a dignified planet does things that are objectively good and right,
Right.
uh, while fallen planets do things that are objectively bad. And the sort of
Hmm.
idea that I've sort of wrestled with a bit, of like, is astrology objective? What is it? Is it saying things objectively, um, like about good and bad, but from the perspective of what? Like, who would be saying, making the objective statement about it? But when you like let go of that a little bit,
Hmm.
um, I mean, you can use that to say like, oh, these fallen planets, they're saying no to life. They're they're not pro-life, which is kind of ironic. Like, but they're pro like looking at reality. They're pro Capricorn, where
Mhm.
the God, did you hear about the woman in Florida who was placed on probation recently for 2 years probation for
Mm-mm.
uh, for having an abortion because she wouldn't tell them who performed it, and the what the conditions of her probation, where that it was 2 years unless she A, went back home to her home state, or B, got married. Like, if you get married, well, then you have a man, controlling you, or
What?
who's going to be your supervisor. Yeah, oh yeah, women are up in arms about it, and justifiably, because that's pretty fucked up. It's like, I don't know, it's looking a lot like what's that show called? The
Handmaid's
Handmaid's Tale.
Tale?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like, oh boy, no. But anyway, yeah, when you're looking at things from that perspective, it's like, yeah, children are investment. Fuck, we don't even have enough houses for the adults in this country.
Yeah.
Like, we don't,
Mhm.
and there are all kinds of reasons that people get pregnant that are not positive. A lot that are negative. And having the
Mhm.
ability to control that, would be Capricorn, to put restrictions um, on that sort of uncontrolled uh, reproduction of more people. Uh, that has consequences that we're being aware of. And I like that it's Jupiter, Venus on the North Node in
Yeah.
Capricorn in the 11th house. Even it just adds a bit more positivity. But the rising is it's Pisces, but it's about to switch over to Aries, which is interesting because
Mhm.
usually in like horary charts, you don't like to see the ascendant at the very beginning or the end of a sign.
Mhm.
More so at the end, it's sort of indicating like maybe not lasting result, possibly.
Mhm. That's very interesting because the ascendant of the Roe v. Wade chart is at 29 degrees of Pisces, and the IC of the US Sibly chart is at 1 degree of Aries. So
Mm,
they're quite literally straddling the line between those two signs.
yeah, it is. Everything's like opposite too. Like the
Yeah.
Sibley chart, Mars is opposite
Hmm.
Sagittarius. Saturn, I think. Hold on, let me pull the Sibley chart again real quick.
Saturn is in dignity in both charts, which I think is incredibly interesting.
Yeah,
No, that's not right.
Saturn has triplicity in
Saturn.
Gemini.
Okay, yeah,
I don't
and
actually
is
know if
conjunct the descendant, which is interesting, or the descendant of the Sibley chart.
mm, yeah. Wait, Saturn,
Saturn and Gemini
the
in the Roe chart, the original
yeah.
Roe chart, not the overturning chart, is conjunct the descendant of the US Sibley chart.
Oh, now I
So
gotcha. Okay, yeah.
yeah,
Oh, yeah. This isn't giving me a descendant. I don't have that up in my software. Yeah, that is interesting. It's like a lot to. It's a lot to
I'm just it's a
process from
lot
like
for
an
me.
astrological perspective, but
Yeah, it's a lot to process from an astrological perspective, and it's like, it's a lot to process from an emotional perspective. Like, I I am glad that we're talking about this when it is such new news and we're very much still processing it emotionally.
mhm.
I mean, while we were dealing with the tech trouble, I was looking through the news and like trying to catch up on what's going on and see, like, I looked at a chart that showed where abortion was going to be legal immediately and where it was questionable and where it was going to be legal. And, I looked at where it was going to be legal and I saw, a handful of states like the West Coast, um, New England, and like that was pretty much it. Like the rest of the country, like it's either definitely going to be illegal or it's questionable. And looking at the states involved, like maybe it'll be legal in like Pennsylvania, but like pretty much everywhere else, it's like it's done already, and it's been
Mhm.
less than 6 hours. And like for me, it hits really close to home. You know, obviously I'm a woman, but I mean, not necessarily obviously. I didn't announce my pronouns before the show started, but
Mhm.
I am a woman, and you know, I have miscarried twice in the last year. And
Mhm.
if I was in Florida and that had happened, like I I could be in prison. And like I felt like I was looking at a map of the places that I can go. Because when I
Yeah.
miscarried, I didn't both times I didn't even know that I was pregnant yet. So I have to assume that I might be pregnant and I might miscarry every time I travel. And all of a sudden the world got so much smaller for me.
Yeah. Oh, jeez. I'm sorry to hear that. It's like very like a traumatic experience from what I've heard. But obviously, uh, it's really, I don't know. This has got me thinking though too about like the idea of essential dignity, right? And this is
Yeah,
something
yeah.
it's always been sort of glaringly obvious to me that the system of astrology is very rooted in a patriarchal system. Um,
Yep.
and that's part of why it's valid or why it works is because we still have that. Um,
Right.
but oh wow, Saturn's on the descendant of the overturn too, right on the descendant. Uh, oh, oh,
Wait, seriously?
yeah, this is at least the one I got. Yeah, 10 a.m. Um, but we'll get to that. Yeah,
Yeah.
actually, I mean, this is relevant. So you have the moon in Taurus in the 10th whole sign house
Mhm.
of the
Mhm.
overturn chart,
Mhm.
um, applying to conjunction with Uranus, which is right on the MC. You got the North Node on the MC. It's sort of saying the opposite of what the Roe v. Wade chart was saying,
Yeah.
at least when it comes to Jupiter and Venus and Capricorn on the North Node. Now you got Moon, Uranus in Taurus on the North Node.
Yep.
And it, it's like maybe the moon is exalted to some degree, or to some degree it is exalted because it represents a lot of these old patriarchal values around the moon. One
Mhm.
of the many things the moon represents is like wombs, people with wombs,
Yeah.
um,
Mhm.
baby making, and the Taurus is a very abundant, fecund sign, and
Right.
and it's applied to a square with Saturn in Aquarius. It's like wanting to not control it. In this case, it's like control it, yes, but like we control the body. We
Mhm.
being the law, and that we say you know, once you have the seed, then you must carry it. Like you must carry it to fruition, which
Yeah.
definitely supports the patriarchal
Mhm.
uh, worldview that has been established for a very long time. Um,
Mhm.
so I mean, it, it makes you wonder, like, about this whole objectivity thing with astrology. That maybe
Mhm.
it's accurate because of the degree that it overlaps with the actual values that we still uphold in society. We're not so far away,
Right.
maybe from the Greeks, who didn't invent
Yeah.
astrology, but they codified, the form that we use today, or at least the what we use today is very much rooted in the form of astrology that they created.
They I think that Hellenistic astrology is responsible for the rulership scheme. Exaltations. I know that Chris Brennan disagrees with this, but the scholarly literature, in my opinion, is pretty clear that exaltations came from Mesopotamia. And
Yeah, this, yeah, I've heard this as well.
And it fits. Like I'm a Mesopotamian astrology nerd. Like I'm fascinated with it, but I'm not fascinated with it because I want to dial the clock back to Mesopotamia.
Hmm.
I am fascinated with it because I have had this instinct for a long time that the roots of astrology in many ways are they predate Hellenistic astrology. And as I have studied Mesopotamian astrology, which is very much still a work in progress for me, it's difficult to find good sources. I have
Hmm.
discovered that a lot of the values in astrology, especially traditional, but they have made their way into modern astrology as well, are rooted in the values of a people who were living in a very precarious place and who needed to or believed that they needed to have systems of hierarchy and power both in heaven and on earth in order to survive.
Mm.
The land was chaotic, the rivers were chaotic, there were series of famines and floods and abundance and lack, and they needed somebody who was able to step outside of the immediate situation where somebody's whining because they're hungry and they need a snack, and understand we need to keep some of the grain in the granary even though we're hungry, because we're going to be starving if we don't do it. And so
Hmm.
their solution to that was to create a system that you know we would call totalitarian. And whether they were right or not, it is the value system that they passed along to us. And so we see it, I think, especially with, like you were saying, with the moon. We see it with Venus. Venus is exalted in Pisces. Why is this?
Hmm.
Because Venus in Pisces is in a position where she will accept absolutely everything and love you anyway.
Yep.
That's like the dream.
Yeah. Which is that's beautiful, right? But it can be problematic. It's good
Yeah,
for other
it's
people. It's good for maybe men
mhm,
because they can do whatever they want, and uh, women will put up with it. And granted, I don't really see Venus as only pointing to women, but it does often point to topics that
right.
concern historically and still to this day uh,
Mhm.
women.
Absolutely. I mean, every man has a Venus, and like even Venus originally was a male god. So
Mhm.
um, I talked
Yeah,
about
but
that in my talk for the Rebecoming the One symposium. But
yeah, just really good. I
thank you.
give me so much food for thought, and it's something I've been thinking about a lot. To your point that astrology definitely predates the Hellenistic model. It definitely predates the Mesopotamian model. There's actually we don't know if it's technically astrology, but there's like 10,000-year-old uh, map that was found on like the inside of a cave of the lunar cycle. They had mapped out the whole lunar cycle 10,000 years ago. So they were watching,
Oh,
and people are meaning makers. Of course, they were making meaning out of that, or using it at least. Just it might have been just practical meaning, knowing the lunar cycle is going to be useful for keeping track of time and knowing, when
yeah.
seasons are going to change, when this or that's going to happen. So
Hmm.
it's it's old and it's deep, and we don't know all the roots of it necessarily. And that I'm super interested in. I would love to have a time machine where
Hmm.
you don't necessarily have to like participate, but if I could just like be in a balloon or something, like, or I don't know, some sort of like time bubble that just let me observe, I would
Hmm.
love. I want to know the origins of like the symbols that we use, like words. Even I want to know what the first word was, like the first noise that we made that represented a thing. Probably had something to do with
Oh.
food or sex, or it might have been a threat. Yeah, it's one of those things.
I feel like until you said the word threat, we summoned Venus and Pisces here by mentioning her, and you were channeling her until that moment. Your Mars was like, "Excuse me, hi."
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's um I guess maybe back to interpreting
Yeah.
this. I don't know. It's stuff like this that will sort of mess with my head a little bit when it comes to
Yeah.
doing astrology, even where I'm like, wait a second, I saw you, Venus and Taurus, in the first house of this horrible serial killer. Do I trust you?
Hmm.
You know, are you
Yeah.
okay? Are you actually as good as we think?
Yeah. I
And I
mean,
think
we
it,
talked about that in our last episode where where we looked at how Venus can be like this elder god, really. But
Mhm. Yeah. Well, and I think there's definitely something to always maybe considering the system that's being upheld. When we're talking about dignity, we're talking about anything in astrology. And I
Mhm.
guess I'm not ready to throw it all out the door. Um, Obviously, because we
I think
still
it's
live in
incredibly
this world
important.
to
Yeah.
keep what the system, or I guess to recognize the system. Go ahead.
I think it's incredibly important to recognize the system, and I think, it's important to recognize that, I still teach the essential dignity system. I mean, technically in my chart interpretation class, you were the one who did the lecture on essential dignity, but um the planets do have power when they're in signs that they rule and in signs where they're exalted. And, we can
Mhm.
recognize the fact that it's complicated that they have power and it's not necessarily in our best interest that they have power. But they still do have power. It is still significant. And I think that one of the places where people with an activist mindset maybe stumble a little bit is there's the tendency to be like, I don't like this, so I'm just going to throw it away. And
Mhm.
when you don't actually have the power to throw that thing away, you aren't actually throwing the thing away.
Yeah.
You are just sticking your head in the sand and refusing to acknowledge reality. And, that doesn't mean that things shouldn't change. It just means that, you shouldn't throw the party and believe that just because you're burning something in effigy means that it's gone.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's like you have to recognize what is in order to
Yeah.
do anything different, or to you got to know what you're working with, like know what
Mhm.
it is you're dealing with. And I guess that also, it always sort of humbles me, I guess, a little bit when as an astrologer, where I'm like, I look at stuff and I'm like, I don't actually know for sure if, like, where this is. I'm always trying to find
Mhm.
the deeper point, but it sort of
Mhm.
forces you to maybe accept there are things that we can't know, or
Mhm.
maybe we're not supposed to.
Yeah, I mean, I've one of the reasons that I'm not a predictive astrologer is because, it's not just me not wanting to believe that prediction is possible because I have seen in some incredible things, but in my particular case, I have noticed that I just keep on enacting the story of Oedipus over and over and over again. I see something that is
Yeah.
significant, I interpret it in a certain way, and then when the event actually comes about, I'm like, that was a valid interpretation of the symbols, but you totally blew it on that one. So
Yeah.
I don't do prediction because I don't want to put anybody else in the situation of, having me blow things for them. But like, um, yeah, I don't remember where I was going with that.
I feel like so often, and I guess I don't end up doing a ton of prediction. I'll do maybe forecasting, get a sense of the weather, but I don't try to like
Mm-hmm.
jump to a conclusion about a specific thing that's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I find, I guess, like when you do it, it's a lot like ancient prophecies, where, like, if you go to war, a great empire will fall. Like, yes, that maybe I think the specific one that's from was from the Iliad, where
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember the king. I can't remember all the names, but wanted to go to war with Troy. He asked the oracle. The oracle's like, "Yeah, great empire will fall if you go to war." And he's like, "Yeah, fuck yeah, let's go, let's do this." But it was his empire that fell. Uh, And that's like how astrology will be sometimes. It's like you get you can say something maybe general that is true, but you may not be able to know the specifics of the thing. Like, the symbolism will come through, So
Yep.
just talk about what that symbolism is.
But very often the prediction is a projection of your hopes and fears. And like you might interpret exactly like you just said, you might interpret the symbol right, but the meaning that you attach to it could be completely backwards.
Yeah.
And like I feel like astrology really likes to do that. Like it really likes to present things in a way that looks so clear, and you know exactly what this is, and then it shows you how your assumptions and your projections are informing your interpretation of things.
I know, and sometimes I love it and sometimes I hate it. It does almost feel like it's toying with me a little bit, and sometimes it seems like that indifferent, God, the cosmic horror shit. And other times it's like I catch you that time. I don't know. It's like, oh, you think you understand how everything works? Nope. It's like it wants to. It's like its own oracle in the sense that it'll say it'll make a generic statement that can be interpreted multiple ways, and it'll be right. But it may not be the kind of right that you thought it would be, or once you think you've got it figured out. That's why Mercury, I guess, traditionally is the rules astrology, which I've heard every planet rules astrology at different points. But
oh my goodness,
Mercury is the translator; it's the diviner of the wisdom of the sun, the knowledge of the sun,
and also the trickster.
And the trickster, absolutely.
We can't forget that Mercury rules liars and thieves. I mean,
the manipulator of information. I think we were talking about that in the Astrology Hotline episode. Came out recently, Aspects Part 2. About the idea of manipulation and how it has this like horrible connotation to it, but we're always manipulating everything. It's just what to alter something. Like, I guess with your hands, the Manny part, but
I hadn't thought about that. You're totally right. So I have been puzzling over the fact that Neptune in the overturning chart is pretty closely conjunct the ascendant in the original Roe v. Wade chart. Like it's not that close. It's 25 degrees versus 29 degrees. But like I don't know. I've been puzzling over that in the gaps in our conversation, and like it feels really significant to me, and not for like any technical reason, like yes, in modern astrology Neptune rules Pisces, but I don't know, maybe it's just because it's in the first house when you put Roe v. Wade's chart in the center. But it just, I don't know, like what does it mean that the planet of transcendence and spirituality, and Neptune is another deceiver planet, escapism, in my experience in transits, Neptune always expresses itself as being really foggy, and so I don't know, like I feel like I can see that it's important, but like I can't quite. Well, I mean, this is an incredibly Neptunian experience. I can see that there's something important there. I can't. Well, that's what Neptune is.
I know. I hate even trying to explain Neptune, because it's almost like when you try to explain it, you invoke it and you lose you lose your ability to put it in words, because I think it very much is stuff that you can't put in words. But it does seem to have this like almost smoke screeny sort of quality, or this like actually my partner Megan was really still is like really involved in the stock market.
Oh.
And we were like looking at transits and stuff and like trying to like identify stuff, because financial astrology is really like almost by different rules. Like it's hard, and it's really confusing, and it like almost seems to contradict itself sometimes. And we're like trying to find like a thread somewhere, and we kept seeing like Neptune involved and stuff. And there does seem to be something very Neptunian about the stock market, in the sense that it's very much, it's built on smoke and mirrors. Like it's not
Yeah.
actually based on value, especially now, where it's based on
Mm-hmm.
there's a bunch of just imaginary shares out there that are
Mm-hmm.
in part what's causing so much of the volatility. And you have dark pools and stuff, and it's a whole another topic that I don't have the bandwidth to, or the knowledge really, to talk about intelligently. But Neptune seems to have that quality, and it seems like a very useful quality in politics, where you're creating, just call it what it is. It's what politics does, even in its best. What politicians do, even in their at their best, is they create an image that is not real. They sell a
Mm-hmm.
dream to you. They sell an ideal. They sell a possibility, and if you're a critical thinking person, that like, are they going to do all these things? No. Are they going to fulfill all the promises that they made? Are they going to do some shit that you don't like? Of course they will. But like,
Mm-hmm.
you sort of take it as an indication of who they are and what their intentions are.
Right.
But that's not always what is. It just seems very
Yeah.
Neptunian, and it's like fog can look like a wall if you like if you cast enough light on it. It just looks like. I don't know where I was going with that, and I don't know what Neptune means in these charts. Honestly, we have Roe v. Wade with Neptune in the 10th house in Sag,
Yeah.
with Mars
Yeah.
in the
And the
8th
midheaven.
on the yeah, pretty close to that ascendant.
Yeah. I don't. As you were talking, I was thinking about, what is the ascendant really, and like, in modern astrology, the ascendant is the face, but in traditional astrology, especially in Hellenistic astrology, um, the ascendant is the horoscopus, the
Mm-hmm.
horoscope, and it's like, the vehicle of fate and fortune, really. And Neptune in the overturning chart is sitting on that, obscuring it, flooding it, um,
Yeah, probably
giving,
distorting it.
escapism. Like we tend to think of the escapism of Neptune as being like video games and drugs, but it's giving an out, an escape at a literal level to
Mm-hmm.
in the conservatives who have been wanting to escape um, Roe v. Wade for decades now.
God, this is. Go ahead. Sorry.
But
What are you doing? Yeah.
one of the interesting things that I've been noticing is that Uranus and the Moon and the Midheaven and the North Node are very close to each other um, in Taurus, and in the overturning chart, they are in the 10th house. So everything is like right there.
Mm-hmm.
But when you put those planets into the original Roe v. Wade chart, they're in the 3rd house. And so what that says to me is that the vehicle for activism, for care and nurturing both of the self and of the others, and the path of spiritual growth with the North Node there, interpreting it from an evolutionary lens, is through the local community. Like, Neptune is sitting on the ascendant of Roe v. Wade in the overturning chart. It's like Neptune dissolves. It's dissolving the fate and fortune that was put in place in the original ruling. And now it's like this new chart is trying to show us a path forward. And the path forward is in the local community. The path forward is by taking care of the people who are close to you, by engaging in activism at the local level. It's like the federal government has dissolved its authority on this issue. It no longer is saying anything in particular. It established rules with Roe v. Wade, and now those rules are gone. And the only rules that are left now are the rules at the local level.
Yeah. This is one of those Austin Coppock words that are really like, honestly, Austin Coppock changed Neptune for me and like made it so much more clear. Granted, like Neptune can be positive. I feel like he fucking hates Neptune, but anesthetic is such a great word for what Neptune will do.
Yeah.
It like numb kind of things out, or almost like a Band-Aid, and there can be almost like a placebo sort of quality to Neptune. And God, it's so much of what I know politics to be. Is that it's placating people, because there are huge, deep fucking problems that don't have obvious answers to them. Take people shooting each other, shooting up schools right now, like gun control. Sure, like that's that'll help, but it's kind of a Band-Aid when we're talking about the fact that people want to do that. Like there's deeper psychological issues maybe that are pervasive in the culture that need to be addressed. How do we do that? I have no idea. But it'd be maybe a good place to put some energy towards working that out. But it's kind of a Neptunian solution in that it'll satisfy people maybe. I'm for controlling the guns. Like we don't need assault rifles, but it doesn't necessarily attack the root issue, and that is kind of what's being described here a little bit. It's like the abortion issue is an absolute issue that affects people deeply. But when it becomes politicized, when anything becomes politicized, it becomes almost this other thing, almost like this Neptunian thing, this abstract thing that like, oh, I just want this win. And like when like your side gets a win, it's sort of like your case is soothed, even though, you might be pro-life, but you also maybe you can't afford your mortgage, or maybe you your wages have not gone up in 20 years, and actually due to inflation are lower than they were 20 years ago.
Right.
There's all these other issues that affect you directly that are not that maybe you can just choose not to have an abortion. That's how you can live your life, and that solves the problem for you maybe. But it doesn't solve all your other problems yet. You've had your political desires sort of satisfied. Let's play this game Tropico, and you're like the dictator of this little island, and everybody has like little bars, and you want to make sure that the bars are high so that the happiness is high. And one of the things that you need to do to stay in power as a dictator is to keep people's political, keep them satisfied based on, their hot button issues, depending on what party they are in. And you can do that and stay in power, but keep everybody in poverty, as long as nobody's too much richer than they are. But also as long as you're solving those hot button issues. But Neptune, anyway. Yeah, I don't know. That's, I think, Neptune shit. It's soothing people, maybe numbing out their anger, over probably a lot of other things that they don't even understand, but sort of obfuscating maybe the actual issues.
Yeah, well, if I said that I like that interpretation, I like the interpretation. I don't like what you're saying, even though I think you're right.
Yeah.
Especially because I think you're right, really. And then we've got, Pluto is directly on top of the Mercury of Pluto in the overturning chart is on top of the Mercury of the Roe v. Wade chart. Like, there's so much drama in this chart. Like, I feel like we could talk about this for hours. Like, what do you make of that? What do you make of the fact that Saturn's on the descendant in the overturning chart? Like, it just, it's interesting. Like, that this is our job, interpreting this stuff and reading the moment and helping people figure out what to do. But at the same time, I feel right now like, and I love this podcast. I love that we're doing it, but I also feel like I can watch myself being sucked into this Neptunian web of going over all of these little details and like, oh my goodness, Pluto is conjunct Mercury, and oh my goodness, Saturn is conjunct the descendant, and there's this interesting semi-sextile between Saturn and Pluto, and like all of these other things, and it's like you can stay in this fun little fog where you're talking about the symbols and not really engaging with the outside world forever.
For sure. Absolutely.
So,
and I know it and I do think about this actually a bit, or at least related to it, is like what is the purpose of astrology? Like, what are we doing it to give us like practical advice for what to do in specific situations? Sometimes, but I mean, sometimes these solutions that astrology offers, almost like a Neptunian sort of solution. Though I'm gonna actually take that back, because I think there's almost, it's like one of the primary needs. I think if humans had if we were like playing The Sims or something, and we had all of our little bars that need to be filled all the time, I think meaning is one of those essential bars. When you don't have meaning, when you can't make sense of things, or put things in a context of something bigger than yourself, like you're not happy, and you're not going to do shit. Honestly, I think.
Yeah.
At least need like a physical, real world goal, but that'll only take you so far too. It's like you need to believe in something, or feel connected to something, and I think that is maybe where I see the main value in astrology. And maybe for me too, because that was something that I was missing for a long time, that feeling of connection. And sometimes astrology doesn't always do it for me. Sometimes it'll be that cosmic alien that is utterly indifferent to me, that I'm trying to make sense of, like, what this otherworldly force is doing to the world. But I think that is maybe the nature of whatever it is we're talking about, astrology or God or whatever, is that it doesn't have like a single perspective, that it has many perspectives. So when you're like interpreting the chart, and you're like, you feel good because you've clicked it into place to form a narrative, form an interpretation, a delineation, right? You're telling the story in a certain way. There's other ways to tell that story too. I don't know. It's like you could look at these charts, and make a case, like make a very pro-choice sort of case if you wanted to use the symbols that way and still be true to the symbols. But it ends up being about, I guess, your relationship to them.
Yeah.
And what they mean to you too. They mean something objectively, I think, but like they mean something that's not objective. I don't know.
Well, I mean, astrology has the Earth at the center of the chart because it is a subjective map. It's a map of the perspective of, when we're talking about event charts, the perspective of the moment. When we're talking about individuals, we're talking about the perspective of the individuals. So, that doesn't mean that it's not real, but it
Mm-hmm.
means that it is deeply personal. And
Yeah.
I think it's important for us to remember that when we're looking at these things. This is how it looks now. It doesn't mean that's how it's going to look later.